you see this, that we carry things away. We ran a story about the fact that he was under consideration, and we got inundated with messages, emails, and other things from people who had worked with him, who characterized him as the worst police officer they'd ever worked with. They informed us that he was under suspicion by the Kansas City Police Department for sexual harassment. He was under suspicion in the Kansas City Police Department. There's a section in here which I probably talk over where the heavy-set officer talks to another officer about the fact that I'm not going to disagree with the chief in his face, and if I'm going to disagree with him, I'm going to disagree outside of there. That kind of becomes important later on. But anyway, he was under suspicion of all these things, and we learned from sources that he was about to be demoted from captain to sergeant. And the way the pensions work in the Kansas City Police Department, your pension is based on your final salary. So if he could leave before he was demoted, his pension would be better. That would be worth coming to Marion, Kansas at half the salary, whereas his pension would be better. We were worried about this. The problem was all the people who gave us this information told us about this. All the people who told us this wouldn't give us their names. You know, the thin blue line, we aren't gonna talk about that. But one of them was his number 2 in command, who was a very well-respected officer who, after he left the Kansas City Police Department, had gone on to train military police for the Army, and was quite well respected. And there was a dozen other people that he sent us about this. We tried to alert this. We couldn't run the story because no one would go on the record, and we tried to get documents from the Kansas City Police, which notoriously will not give you any information about officers and their problems. But we knew it, and we called in a protege of the mayor, who was apparently leading the search of checking the resume of this officer, and told him all about what we found. He told us that he'd already checked his credentials, which actually wasn't true, and to mind our own business. We called the Kansas City Police HR department. He hadn't checked the credentials. He checked them 2 days later, and he specifically told them, don't tell me anything, that there hasn't been a final judgment issued, don't tell me anything about a pending case because we don't want to hear about it. So he basically knew how to answer the question. Well, this heavy-set guy, as in part of while they're doing the newsroom, he's going through this desk that's in the right foreground. That was the desk of the reporter who had gathered the information about the police chief. And he goes through the desk and he finds this file with the chief's name on it, actually labeled Captain Gideon Cody after his Kansas City Police Department days. And he calls Gideon Cody over and he says, you should come see this. It's, well, you have the right to look at it. No, you should come see this. It's the file that had all the information, had the first page of it was the LinkedIn profile of the main source. So he knew who it was. He looked at it. We have it on body cam that he looked at it and other things of that nature. So we initially thought that that was what was motivating all this, because the raid itself just didn't make sense. We were accused of identity theft. I mean, you don't conduct big raids on identity theft unless there's somebody who's, like got 3,000 credit cards that they've come up with. We also started worrying because the raid was so massive. The police officers had bragged to people around town that this was going to be the biggest raid in the history of Marion County. In fact, they employed more officers in this raid than they had on duty. They had to call in a state fire marshal as a backup police officer. There were, by the time all was said and done, there were 7 police officers in the home of my mother. 7. A week earlier, they had executed a search warrant at the home of a suspected child rapist who was known to have guns in his house. They'd sent 2 officers to that. Apparently, a 98-year-old woman in a walker is more dangerous than a rapist with guns. But they went ahead and did this and made her wait for 2.5 hours while officers stayed in her house doing things. And eventually, 7 of them showed up.
Nothing but a bunch of bullets.
That's her
Down.
After about 2 hours, she was very upset about this. You can hear her crying in the background.
I don't understand how good people can live.
Now these are our home videos. They were motion activated, but I'll continue on with another one that she accused them at various points of being Nazis, and she also.
Police team that have authority to be here under the search warrant.
You get the hell out of my house.
We're going to be here under the search warrant.
Come here, I can't hear you. Be courteous enough to come over here and talk to me.
We're going to go as fast as we can.
I am hard of hearing.
We're going to go as fast as we can. We'll be on here shortly.
What are you doing?
We're grabbing some items.
What?
Making some computers.
Boy, you're going to be in trouble. Boy, are you going to be in trouble. You take my computer, that's personal property. I have done nothing. Good grief, are you in trouble? Oh. Well, thank goodness you are. Thank goodness we got people living away from this town that have some sense. Get out of my house! Okay. Where's my son?
I had gone down to the newspaper office because I knew they were being raided. And I eventually came back, but by that time, she was done. This is probably my favorite of her.
Right?
Yes.
She's trying to use Alexa to call me.
Don't you touch any of that stuff.
Ma'am.
This is my house.
Ma'am. Get out of here.
You asshole.
Get out of here pretty quick.
Get them out of here. They're here. You done.
That's my seized cell phone ringing because she was trying to call me.
Your mother loves you. You love her mother. You're an asshole. Yeah.
She's a retreater.
Get out. Stand outside. You stand outside that door. I don't want you in my house. I don't want you to be united.
That, by the way, is the fire marshal that she's talking to.
Thank you. Get everyone down there and stay up here.
Now, you notice
What's he doing over there going to the papers?
the papers, the heavy set cop is
I'm
going
not
for.
Get out of my way. I want to see what they're doing.
They're working.
I don't care what they're doing. What are you doing? Those are personal papers.
They weren't electronic devices. The heavyset cop was going through a stack of papers on her game table. The stack of papers on her game table were my bank statements and investment accounts because I'd been reconciling them that day. She went on like this. They eventually, after 2.5 hours, took her computer, and when they did that, they took the router too, which took out her Alexa device, which took out our surveillance cameras. So the things end at some point. And they went away. My mother was very distraught about this, as you can imagine anyone was. And I should digress right at this point and say that so was the husband of the vice mayor, who was a person who was suffering from dementia. Not quite as old as my mother, he's in his 80s. My mother's 98 at this time. But he has not been the same since the raid. because of the concern. One of the things that we've often talked about is the First and Fourth and 14th Amendment rights that were broken in this case. There's also a case to be made about how police conduct raids in the homes of senior citizens and how they should be better off. There was one cop out of the 7 who refused to enter the house. He quit within the week.
Good for
There
him.
was another cop who was there for 2 hours. He also quit within the week. The heavyset guy ended up taking over as the interim police chief, but about a few months ago, they decided to declare a permanent police chief, and they declared someone else to be the police chief and urged him to resign, and he did. There are now no longer any members of the Marion Police Department who are still from the time that this happened. There also are no longer any members of the Marion City Council, the one who had told us to mind our own business, and earlier had yelled at us at a city council meeting that all you ever do is ask questions. Kind of, yeah, that's the point, that's what we do. Well, he resigned last week, so the city council was completely turned over as well. We were concerned about this. My mother was very upset. She sat back in that chair where she was. By the way, as the police officers exited, we caught them on body cam. The heavyset cop was recommending that they charge her with aggravated assault and battery of a police officer for attacking him with her walker. It's that scene right there that he contended that was true. And afterward, all the cops went down to the sheriff's office for a pizza party, celebrating what a wonderful day that they had had. In the middle of all this, they stopped a few times. Gideon Cody, the police chief, who after she started objecting, as you noticed, retreated to the very far back behind all of these other officers. He went around and he had trouble with his body cam video. We have really good body cam footage of him relieving himself at Casey's General Store. We also have body cam footage of him talking to the person who supposedly was the complainant in this case and telling her, we can't exchange any text messages anymore. We have to, isn't it wonderful how we've done this? There's another angle to this story that we hadn't explored, that he may have had in a relationship with the person whose identity supposedly was stolen. But let's back up and before we go on, talk about my mother a little bit. She sat in that chair, the far chair over there, for the rest of the night. She, in fact, didn't go to bed. She wouldn't go to bed. At 6:30 in the morning, she finally went to bed. She may have gone sometime before that, but I woke up at 6:30, and I checked her at 5, and she was still in the chair, still sitting there fuming about this, saying, where are all the good people? At 6:30, she went to bed. Later on, close to noon, I heard her get up and use the restroom. And I went into her room and said, you know, you refused to eat anything Friday. This was Friday. It's Saturday now. It's noon. You really need to get something to eat. Can I make you some breakfast or lunch or something? Do you want me to serve it here in your bedroom, or do you want to do it in the kitchen? You want to go out to the family room? And she says, I don't know. I don't feel to. And she died.
Oh my gosh.
She collapsed of sudden cardiac arrest. The coroner, I tried to give her CPR. EMTs came. They spent an hour trying to give her CPR. The coroner came, and the coroner filled out a death report saying that it was sudden cardiac arrest brought on by the stress of the raid. This outpouring of concern about the raid, I had objected initially on the grounds of the Kansas Shield Law, and I didn't specifically say the Federal Privacy Protection Act, but the Federal Privacy Protection Act, which was adopted way back in the 1980s, says that law enforcement officers should not conduct searches of news organizations and reporters and other things. That you should, if you have a document that you think is something you should get, you issue a subpoena for it, which would allow the news organization to come in and argue whether you should get it or not. It also prevents you from going through desks and finding out other things that are unrelated to the search warrant. I objected to that. They didn't pay any attention to it. We started worrying about the outpouring of case came out. About that time, the county attorney decided that after he was told and warned by some other county attorneys and district attorneys in the state that he might be liable for this, he withdrew the search warrant and returned the material to us that had been stolen, but waited until after our paper was out for that week. They had taken everything we had. We didn't even have our nameplate. We didn't have the thing on the front page that says Marion County Record. We didn't have it. They'd taken they'd taken all the little backup drives we had. They'd taken our file server. They'd taken everything we had. We had to retrofit this out of where we found it was we had a low-res PDF of the paper that was put online with our website. That's where we got this stuff from. Now, this is not going to make a lot of sense to anybody who's not in the newspaper business, but that week before that, when they raided us, was the week in which the delinquent tax list ran. This is like 3 pages of newspaper that's all names and numbers. We didn't have it. It had to run 2 more weeks. We had to retrofit that out of our PDF online, which meant we had to write a computer program to take it out and reformat it so that it would run again in the paper that we were giving out copies of back here because we overran that paper. We have a few extras of it. We ran 2 all-nighters to put the paper out. They'd taken all of our reporters' machines, all of our file servers. We fortunately had what euphemistically would be called our supply room or equipment room, which more likely is known as the junk room. And we had some old Windows XP computers that were stuck in there. And we pulled them out and set up a network of the old Windows XP computers. And we did 2 all-nighters to put that paper out that we've distributed in here. It was a pain in the rear, but we managed to get it out. And then right as soon as we got it out, they gave us our equipment back. So they apparently decided to give our equipment back on Saturday or Sunday, but they didn't get around to doing it until Wednesday. Kind of suspicious. So we started looking into what's going on with that. The KBI, which had been involved in the discussions and had told the local authorities, don't do the search, came in and took over the case. And then it became obvious that the KBI might actually be involved in this, and so they brought in the Colorado Bureau of Investigation to do an independent investigation of it, headed by the District Attorney of Sedgwick County and the County Attorney of Erie County. They conducted more than a year of investigation of what went on, and learned some very interesting things in doing that. The first thing that they learned was that the county attorney had never read the search warrant application. Well, that prompted an attorney, not us, but an attorney, I believe, in Albuquerque, New Mexico, to complain to the state that the county attorney was not doing his job. But it turns out county attorneys have qualified immunity. And although it's recommended that prosecutors read search warrant applications before they're granted, and if you watch any TV show about cops, you'll know that, well, the prosecutor wouldn't allow us to do the search warrant. Well, he didn't read it. He'd been sick one day, or his family was sick, and the other day he was busy. And what had really happened was the sheriff had sent him an email message that said, don't mess with this. You don't want to be any part of this. Which is also why the sheriff didn't show up himself at the raid, which is part of the reason why the police officers quit, that they thought the sheriff was hanging them out to dry. So they said, well, he's not required to read it, so we can't do anything about it. They were supposed to have taken this to the district court judge. Marion County has a district court judge. She refused to look at it. We didn't know this at the time. So they found a district court magistrate from Morris County who happened to be in the county that day, handling some traffic cases or something. She was scheduled to have a bunch of hearings at 9 a.m. They took the documents to her at 8:58 and said, we need these search warrants signed. We're all ready to go. We need these search warrants. And she signed them. She also noted that they weren't even notarized. So she notarized them as well. That prompted a complaint from a Topeka resident, and again, this attorney in Albuquerque, who sent to the Judicial Ethics Panel a complaint against her. And the Judicial Ethics Panel said she didn't do anything wrong. There is no law that says that she, there's no responsibility. If she approved the search warrant, it's fine. But in the future, we're going to put something in her file urging her to, in the future, before you sign a search warrant, read it. So this was a little fishy as we go along. And then we started looking back and saying, well, what does the mayor have to do with this? Because the mayor had been a thorn in our side and we in his for many, many months, if not years. In fact, people have said, when did it first start? Actually, it started 20 years earlier, when he had been city administrator of the town. And this was one of the very first blue-green algae alerts that you've heard about all over everywhere. And normally the blue-green algae is not bad. It'll cause skin irritation, it might cause diarrhea, it might do it. But there's a particular type of blue-green algae called anamena, which the toxin that it releases is a potent neurotoxin that can kill. And that was what was found in Marion Reservoir, the source of water for both Marion and Hillsborough. Hillsborough immediately stopped taking water from the reservoir. KDHE did not have the authority to tell them this, but urged them to do so. Hillsborough stopped taking water from Marion Reservoir, and Marion, under the city administrator, led everyone to believe that they had stopped taking water from the reservoir too. We were finally tipped off by a certified water technician from the Hillsborough water plant that Marion was continuing to take water from the reservoir throughout all of this. We confronted the mayor, and he denied it. The Wichita Eagle then picked it up. They confronted the mayor, and he finally sort of admitted it and then apologized for misleading the public as to what he was doing. This was 20 years earlier. We had reason not to trust this guy who had been a highway patrolman, retired, was hired as Marion's police chief, and suddenly when the city administrator quit, they had promoted the police chief to be the city administrator. Didn't really know anything about being a city administrator, but he was. He survived by one vote several attempts to oust him by the city council, and then eventually retired. After he retired as city administrator, he ran for city council and finished dead last in a race of 8 candidates. A few years later, the vice mayor and another council member, both of whom were very popular, wanted to get 3 members of the council to be able to change. They actually wanted to fire the replacement of city administrator for him. And they got him to agree that he would vote to fire the city administrator. And on the vice mayor's coattails, he was elected mayor as part of this ticket. He got into office and changed his mind and decided he wasn't going to vote that way. After that, he behaved in office in a manner that we unfortunately are seeing evidence of from other elected officials around this country, which is to say, laws, oh, they don't really matter. I'm in charge. I can do whatever I want to. And so we started being very incurious in his actions, and we started reporting. Probably the first in the series was when they passed a Charter Ordinance 22, which said that, those bond elections that we have that voters have to approve borrowing by signing on to bonds, not so much anymore. The city council can just do it by a simple resolution, which doesn't have to be published. We can borrow as much as we want to. Or we can do an ordinance, or we could go back and have the public vote on it, but we don't have to. They passed this, and the way Kansas's Charter Ordinance law, which is a stupid law, by the way, is you can pass a charter ordinance and if the voters don't like it, they can petition to have an election to reject it. It should be the other way around. The charter ordinance should be voted on by the public. It shouldn't have to be the burden of passing a petition. But the vice mayor and a former mayor organized a petition drive to get this on the ballot. It did get on the ballot. It was rejected by a 10-to-1 margin in voting. There had been attempts to persuade this because the mayor had instructed that the charter ordinance be included in the city's utility newsletter. The city provides electric and water service and sewer and trash pickup and all that. And They have a newsletter that goes out with the bills. And he ordered that the ordinance be put in that so that people could see it. Section 1 of the ordinance, not Section 2, which is the one that takes away the right to vote. We asked the person who put the newsletter out why she left out Section 2. She says, I was just doing what I was instructed to do. So it's pretty obvious that we were trying to deceive people. It proceeded on after the mayor was so upset with the vice mayor that he tried to have her recalled. He tried to pass a petition which he didn't get enough signatures on. And the smoking gun was that she had revealed an opinion that she had had in executive session to us at the newspaper, which, by the way, is not illegal in the state of Kansas. Any member of goes into an executive session, they're perfectly free to talk about what they talked about. But she also violated the Open Meetings Act by sending out an email after an agenda for a council meeting came up, and it was sent to all the council members, and they replaced it with a corrected agenda, and she accidentally hit reply all, and her message to all the council members was, thanks. Well, that technically would be a violation of the Open Meetings Act, but it didn't get anywhere. Meanwhile, the mayor was employed as a part-time jail transport officer by the sheriff's department. There was a situation involving negotiations with the sheriff's department over the amounts of money involved in a drug dog that had been in the sheriff's, had been in the city, and then it moved to the sheriff's, and then it moved back to the city, and what compensation the sheriff's department would get for moving it. And he had a fit that anybody else was going to negotiate with the sheriff's department other than him. Well, as an employee of the sheriff's department, he was forbidden by city ethics code to do it, but he had a fit and did it anyway. He then went out and unilaterally gave raises to certain city employees that he liked without going to the council to get permission, which always was passed was done. And did a series of other things, all of which we reported, all of which made him mad. And he was also mad at the vice mayor. At one time he posted on Facebook, I wish I had the exact phrasing, because it tells you a lot about him. It isn't the black people, it isn't the gays, it isn't the Muslims that you worry about. It's the journalists, educators, and professors who are destroying American society. Well, I'm the only one in Marion, Kansas. And he posted that like a few days before the raid. He'd also told the city council members that the only way he could get rid of the vice mayor was to have her convicted of a crime. So comes a time when the new congressman, we'd just gotten gerrymandered out of the 1st Congressional District and put into the 2nd Congressional District at the time when they took Douglas County and stuck it in the 1st District, and then we became the 2nd District, so that would make the 2nd District a safer seat for Republicans. He came to speak at a public forum, and he sent his office sent us a personal invitation to go to this public forum. We showed up at this coffee shop, and the owner of the coffee shop had the police chief come over and throw us out. She at the time said that she didn't want any media representatives there. She later said that she didn't mind media representatives, she just didn't want us there. It doesn't really matter. She used the excuse, I reserve the right to refuse service to anyone, which is an excuse that hasn't been used with bad effect in other cases. But we got thrown out. We waited around until the congressman came out. And in fact, we weren't upset about this because we would have gone into the public meeting and, then we would listen to somebody explain about, what are you going to do about the transgender abortion doctors that are fleeing across the border to stuff our ballot boxes? Oh, I'm going to fight them. But we managed to get the guy to come down. He spent an hour and a half in our office being interviewed by 2 of us, so we actually got a better interview out of it as a result of this. But we did put in the paper that we'd been thrown out. That afternoon, we got a call. One of our reporters got a call from a woman who said, that woman who threw you out, she's applying for a liquor license at the next Monday's meeting, And she can't legally drive and has been driving illegally for the past 20 years because of an unresolved drunken driving conviction. And we said, how do you know this? And she said, here. And she gave us a document that showed it. We said, where'd you get this document? No, it's not public record, you can get it. And we tried to get it, and we actually had trouble getting it. We couldn't quite figure out how she got it. So our reporter ended up calling the Department of Revenue, which is where it was kept, and asked an employee there, how do you get it? And they said, well, there's two ways. One way you can get it, any member of the public can get it, and it's free. There's another one that costs $16, and only the person who is involved can get it, can do that. He says, well, tell me about the, if you knew our reporter, she's very cheap. She wouldn't have paid the $16. So she has the notes about how you find it on the free site. And we looked to make sure that this letter that the woman had sent us as a Facebook picture, I mean, you know, you can't trust what's a Facebook picture. It could easily be faked. We made sure that that was the same thing that was there. We debated whether we were going to do it after you discover, first of all, is it true? Second, do you want to use any about it? We consulted another source who determined that the restaurant owner had been going through a divorce settlement with her husband, with her estranged husband, who is a disabled Gulf War veteran who doesn't have the use of legs. And this vehicle has hand controls, special hand controls, that he was wanting to get it in the divorce settlement because he was paying insurance and it was designed for him to use, not her. And his argument was going to be that she shouldn't have it because she doesn't even have a driver's license. And when we learned that this was part of a divorce, we said, nah, we're not going to do this. We're not going to run any of this. But the person who gave us the record is a former dispatcher and the wife of a former highway patrolman who contended that for 20 years, local officers were well aware of the fact that she was driving illegally and didn't do anything about it. We, in fact, asked a local officer off the record, and he said, yeah, we know. We aren't going to deal with her because she's such a, pardon my language, bitch. And they didn't want to deal with her. We talked to an attorney whether it was legal for us to have a copy of this document, and he said, yes, it is. It's a public document. Bottom line. So I wrote a letter to the sheriff and the police chief saying, we've received this document from an anonymous source, and it says these things. We aren't sure that she got it the way we got it. She might have gotten it through her contacts because she kept saying, I have contacts, that's how I got this. But we don't plan to do anything with it, other than the fact that we might try to do something about the fact that she hasn't been charged and people are aware of it. We sent that letter off on a Friday afternoon to the sheriff and the police chief. The police chief didn't check his mail until Monday morning. Immediately upon checking his email, the first indication that someone was aware of this was from that city council member who had told us to mind our own business. And all you ever do is ask questions. Sent a message to the restaurant owner saying that Ruth Herbal, the vice mayor, who had also received a copy of this from the same source, was trying to use this to deny her liquor license. And she was doing this in collaboration with me personally. Well, first of all, Ruth and I never talked about it. Ruth had seen the initial post on Facebook that somebody was going to provide information about the restaurateur. We intentionally never answered that post. The restaurateur saw that she was asking, where is it? She just, the source, and she just sent it to Ruth as well. And Ruth had forwarded it to the city council. How anybody on the city council knew that we had it is only if Gideon Cody had told them we had it. That was at 9 in the morning. By the middle of the afternoon, the police chief went to the restaurant owner and said, you've been the victim of a crime. She says, really? I have? Yes, someone stole your mail and distributed it to the vice mayor and to the city council. And, oh my, well, this is terrible. And so she went to the city council meeting that night and complained about it. And she accused us of supplying it to the vice mayor. I called her after the city council meeting. She says, oh, I know you didn't do it. I know who gave it to you. She says, well, I'm not going to tell you because I'm a source. She says, well, it was Pam Mogg. She gave her name, which is who it was. And she says, and she got it from my estranged husband. And I said, I can't confirm or deny that, but it's right. She knew it the Monday night before the raid. They brought her in on Tuesday to swear out a complaint that we'd stolen her document. She already knew we hadn't done it, but she swore out the complaint. Meanwhile, the heavyset officer called the Department of Revenue and asked, how did you get this document? And they told him the two ways to get it, and one of them was legal and one of them wasn't. And he ignored the fact that one of them was legal, wrote only about the one that wasn't. And oh, by the way, he didn't even get the name of the person he was talking to. So we don't know who it was. You know, it was whoever answered the phone. Based on that investigation and that investigation alone, which the special prosecutors said was either incompetent or malicious or just proved that a weird lack of whatever, because the conversation was recorded. We have a recording of it that they've reviewed, and you can hear very clearly that they aren't saying that anybody broke the law. They proceeded to work on a search warrant for us. The chief of police and the sheriff together. The sheriff suggested that they also raid my house because I was known to do work from home. What they wanted to find out in raiding the vice mayor, Ruth Herbel's house, we still don't know. When they went to the record and raided our office, sitting next to my computer was the copy of the picture that had been sent to us by the source, with my reporter's notes on it about how to obtain it legally. They didn't even take it. They didn't even take it. They weren't there to find out anything about an identity theft crime. They also accused us, the other warrant said that we were violating computer security laws, but the law that they cited didn't have anything to do with computer security. It had to do with white slavery and use of telecommunications facilities and furtherance of that. They eventually got rid of that, but that was what was supplied on the probable cause affidavit for the search warrant. Both the heavyset officer and the guy in light blue who's bending over at the computer right now warned the sheriff and police chief that they thought it was not proper to search newsrooms, that they were aware of crimes about this. The sheriff's secretary showed the whole group of them assembled, well, you don't need to do anything illegal to get this. Here's how you get it, and showed them how it was done. Yet they proceeded to go after a search warrant. The only way to get rid of Ruth Herbel was to have her convicted of a crime. Oh, we could get the newspaper at the same time. The mayor denied that. He says, when I learned that they were investigating one of my council members, I said, I don't want to hear anything about it. That's what he told everybody. We, under the Kansas Open Records Act, asks for all communications sent between the people involved. By the way, there's a loophole in the Kansas Open Records Act that city council members can send things to each other and it's not open. It's not an open record. But this was a message that the mayor had sent to the city administrator. And they denied that any such message existed. During discovery in that lawsuit, the city administrator admitted that it did exist. The city was found guilty of acting in bad faith, was ordered to pay $78,000 in legal fees about it, and we got the message, which says, the mayor says, I met today with the police chief and the sheriff, and I told them I was behind their investigation 100%. Can't wait to see the outcome. He denied that he ever talked to him about it. That was on Tuesday, before the raid, which was on Friday. Wednesday, they tried to get the documents all finalized. The KBI wanted them, don't do this. We want KBI experts to be able to come in and look at it before you do anything. And they said, no, we don't want to do that. They wanted to do the raids on Thursday, but the county attorney was out of the office. And anyway, the sheriff had already told him, don't do anything with this. They called on Friday, and the county attorney's secretary took the documents over to the court without the county attorney ever seeing them. That's how the raid came about. Since this has happened, there have been multiple lawsuits filed. The reporter whose notes were taken, Deb Groover, who left shortly after the raid because she didn't feel safe in Marion. She has settled with both the city and the county for, in both cases, around $250,000. Phyllis Zorn, the reporter who actually got the material, has settled with the county for about $2/3 of $1 million. Our office manager, who had nothing seized, but she settled for about $250,000 with the city and the county. But the suits against the county are now settled. We and Ruth Herbal settled against the county. We have not settled against the city. The city was the primary mover. The total settlement from the county was a little over $3 million. We expect that the city should have to pay more than the county because they were more involved in it. It was their raid, it was their search warrant. We have been going round and round about the city about how much insurance it has, which, by the way, isn't admissible in the case. They can't say, well, we don't have enough insurance to pay for it. They initially told us they had $1 million in insurance. Then they said it was $2 million. Now it appears that it may be as high as $6 million. We aren't quite sure. That's still coming out. But we want to do two things. We want the settlement to be a little more, and with the county it was $50,000 more. This is not much. This is, half of a pickup truck that they're going to buy. Just enough to say it wasn't just insurance took care of it. And we want a court ruling. We did not have a settlement in the case against the county. We had what is called a stipulated fine judgment. The county had to admit that what happened was wrong. And Ruth Herbal, the vice mayor, also wanted an apology from them. So they apologized. And they did admit, it's kind of a strange statement, that basically says, wrong was done. Well, and this is like the 4-year-old that says, it broke. No, you broke it, Wrong was done, and then they say, if we had been in charge of this, wrong wouldn't have been done. But the city's going to have to make a statement to that, because the first thing that happened when we filed the suit was their lawyers had come out and said this Privacy Protection Act, which says you're supposed to use subpoenas instead of search warrants, has never been tested in a court ruling. So it isn't established law, so you can't expect law enforcement officers to obey it. So we say, okay, well, we want an established law. That's one of our main objectives. It's got to be written down. Now, it's been sort of written down, but it's very vague with the county's case. We want a more definitive thing from the city. And honestly, we want as much money from the city, or a little bit more, than we do from the county. It's not for us, and by and large, we don't get all of this money anyway. It goes to the reporters and the office managers, and the estate of my mother, and me personally, and the newspaper, because we're 3 separate entities suing. So we're looking for that. We have a mediation session scheduled for about a month from now. We don't expect there to be a settlement of it. At the earliest, we are likely to find out that this will probably go to trial a year from maybe November, maybe later than that. Right now, we're going through discovery. Among the things that the city has wanted is they want my personal income tax returns for the past 10 years. They want to know when and where I was ever married. They want to know all sorts of stuff that apparently you can ask for. We can deny that we're going to give them. But if you deny it, then the judge, actually the magistrate who assists the judge, will have to set you have 90 days to make your case for this, and then I'll have 120 days to make a ruling, and then you'll have 90 days to respond to my ruling, and meanwhile we're going to suspend all action on the case. It's just delaying tactics. They're just trying to push it out as far as they can, and hope that probably the current city council will all be out of office and replaced by somebody else who will have to deal with the problem later on. So that's the experience of this. The nice thing, and for those of you who want to see it, there's been a there's actually been two or three documentaries, but a real feature-length documentary called Seized, put out by Horizon Productions, that premiered at the Sundance Film Festival this year, and will be shown in June at the Free State Film Festival in Lawrence. It has been, I can't tell you everything I know about this because there's some privacy agreements out there that they want to be able to announce it, but a major cable and streaming service has purchased this movie. It will be a blank original, as they do it, and it is scheduled to air in November or December nationwide, worldwide, on pay TV and streaming service channels. So that's coming out in the near future. You can get an early view of it at the Free State Film Festival in Lawrence. It was at True Faults in Columbia, Missouri. Before that, it's going to be at DC Docs in Washington, DC. It's been all over everywhere. It's been in Milwaukee, it's been wherever. So they show it at film festivals, but they can't show it. I know there was an attempt to try to show it here, but the contracts don't allow you to do that. But it's an hour-and-a-half documentary. It's kind of a fun, different approach to things, because it starts off one way and ends up another way, and has some interesting characters in it. It's got really good reviews. It's got a 100% fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes. So it's coming your way. Meanwhile, we're trying to still put out a newspaper. Now, we've had some problems with staffing because, A, people don't want to work for newspapers anymore because they look around and see what's been done to so many of them and how they've been gutted and that there's no future for them. It still is for newspapers that remain locally owned and locally operated and in a community that is still a cohesive community. Is there a future for a newspaper in a metro area? Not so sure. But in small communities, there certainly is. As long as there's still a community that exists. The advertising is not going to support it because there's so many businesses that aren't owned locally that you have to go corporate to get an ad from. And those corporate people look at all those other newspapers that are out there and say, oh, they're pieces of crap, you don't want to advertise in that thing. But we still have a decent newspaper. We will, Friday of this week, we will pick up the Investigative Reporting Award from the Kansas Press Association for all newspapers of all sizes. It's first place in the state, and a cash award for that.
Wow,
Second
good.
year that we've gotten a cash award for investigative reporting.
That's good.
Some years in which we swept first, second, and third place with different stories. So there's still stuff out here. Journalism is still alive. We are benefiting from having a cash infusion, but we also are benefiting from other things. We've had trouble attracting people, so we've decided to create a new program, and we're actually exploring this with the William Allen White Foundation at the University of Kansas. We're a trustee of that. Creating a one-year fellowship for graduating students to come and spend a year in a small community. Actually, the requirement right now is it has to be in a county the size of Lyon County or smaller, because that's the William Allen White tie. And we'll pay them a decent amount of money, which would be underwritten with money from the foundation, which is where if we get cash, that money's going to go to pay for this program. We have done a pre-test on it this year. We've already hired our first kid, who's a Wichita State University graduate, and I'm just ready, once I get home today, I'm going to call up another one and offer her a job. She is from Galena, but she actually is a graduate of Cal State Northridge. We're going to have two of them there. In addition to that, we've had people volunteer to come help us. They read an editorial I wrote that said we were short of people, and retired journalists, two of them so far. Actually, there's a third one who's waiting in the wings. But Clara Germani, who has worked for many years at the Christian Science Monitor, she's been, among other things, the Moscow bureau chief. She spent a month in a yurt in Siberia, and she's come down. She's not here with us this week, but will be back middle of the week. She's going to be there through September. We have another reporter who actually worked for the Washington Post. He was in the Beirut, Cairo, Tel Aviv, Baghdad, basically every bureau that you can imagine during the two Gulf Wars. And he's going to come and spend a month with us in July. And that's going to help train the two young people that we're bringing in that we're going to keep for a year. And hopefully they may want to stay longer than a year. Now, we're going to have to change people every year because we can't force people to live in a small town where, you know, if you want something to eat, you better get it by 7 o'clock because everything will be closed. And if you find that you need something else, get it by 11 because that's when Casey closes. And by the way, there's only like 2 restaurants that you can go to, and if you don't like what they serve, good luck. So there's a lot of problems with trying to bring young people in, not the least of which is the fact that they think journalism is dead. Journalism isn't dead. If it is dead, democracy is dead. Democracy will be dead with it. One of the big problems, and I'll kind of step back to being a college professor for a little bit here. There's something called persuasion theory, which says that you are persuaded by certain types of arguments in certain situations. If you believe you have control over something, that your voice matters, you will look at the facts and examine the facts of the situation. If you believe that you don't have personal control or it doesn't personally affect you, you're going to be swayed by slogans and images and other things. It's called heuristic processing versus systematic processing. One of the things that's happened to our society is that people have become so disconnected that they're processing everything heuristically. Everything is about slogans. It's about the transgender abortion doctors floating across the border to stuff our ballot boxes. My idea is that we need to change this. We need people to stop thinking that way because this is what gives rise to populist movements. And I'm not arguing merely at the current occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. But it was true on the other side of the political exchange. If Bernie Sanders had been elected, it would be somewhat of a similar situation. People going out and saying, ignore the law, just go break things. Go, do whatever you need to do. Break them. Bomb that country. Who cares? Because they don't really see the issues. They don't really examine the issues. It's important to get people in the habit of examining issues. And I can't come up with the issues in Iran. I can't come up with the issues about affordability of prices, but I can come up with issues about the pothole in front of the house. And if I can get people to work together, to listen to each other, and come to a compromise where they actually will move forward rather than sit here and say, pothole, that's a problem of the Democrats. No, that's a problem of the Republicans. And the pothole just stays there. If we can get people to cooperate, listen to each other, talk to each other, arrive at a conclusion together, and the best way to do that is about local issues that they feel they do have some control over. That's why we need local newspapers. It's going to be different. The papers are going to cost more because we don't have advertising. And they're probably going to have smaller circulation, although we doubled our rate and didn't lose a subscriber. Of course, right after the raid, we got just an influx of subscribers and people who wanted to support us. Marion is the 122nd largest town in Kansas. Marion County is the 57th largest county in Kansas. I think my memory on these numbers, but it's close to that. Right after the raid, we had the 8th largest paid circulation in the state. Because people came up and volunteered. The interesting thing is, a lot of them have stuck with it. They're still subscribing. I get letters from people in California, people in Minnesota, people in Texas, talking about local issues. How come the city council bought that kind of truck? It should have bought this other kind of truck. And they send letters to the editor, and they're reading this stuff. Most of them say, I used to have a newspaper in my hometown. I don't anymore. So I've adopted your town. We've become Mayberry. We're the small town that they can live with. And it's true. when comes July, I will have, at the Marion County Record, if you count me as a journalist, because I am, I will have Clara, I will have, I'll have 7 journalists working on a weekly newspaper.
That's good.
That is more than the total staff of the Salina Journal, the Hutchinson News, the Newton Kansan, the McPherson Sentinel, the El Dorado Augusta Times Gazette, more than them combined.
Wow.
It's not just more than them combined. It's double their staff combined. We've been ripped off. Not because journalists, not because newspapers are a thing of the past. Because they aren't. But because there have been a lot of greedy corporations that have come out and bought them. And we've had a generation of owners who have wanted to retire and needed to sell, and there hadn't been anybody to sell to but them. And that's what's happened. They've lost advertising support. The big companies come in and say, hey, they've got really cool real estate. We can sell that real estate and make our money back right away. And then just leave a person there to run the place. The Hutchinson News currently has a news staff of 0. This is a great newspaper. This was one time one of the best newspapers in the state. It has a news staff of 0. It had a news staff of 1 for a while. She sent all of her stuff to Bartlesville, Oklahoma to have somebody edit it. And the pages were designed in Austin, Texas. She talked to me one time. She said, I had a problem with the Austin, Texas people. In 3 months period, 12 times they misspelled the name Hutchinson.
Would be a problem.
So I complained to Gannett. You know what Gannett did? Stop sending her page proofs. That's not a sign of the times. That's not competition from online. Our circulation, more people read us online than do in print. That's true. And more people start subscribing to us online. But unlike what you might think, most of our subscribers who start online then buy the paper in print as an add-on because they like being able to see the print paper. There's research that shows that even digital first people in their 20s, will prefer to pay more money for something that's in print than they will that's online. The print has value to it. Our big challenge with it is the Postal Service. I could go on an hour and a half about the problems of the Postal Service. But the real thing is that if you provide surprising content, it has changed the nature of journalism. We no longer can just be the Chamber of Commerce, rah, 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 the town is wonderful, everything's great, you should all feel good about yourselves. People read it because they want to know where the problems are. And that's important because you don't solve problems unless you know what they are. The first step in solving a problem is finding out what it is. So we do a lot of investigating things and people think it's negative. They always will. We get used to that. It's interesting how this restaurant owner, who at various points asked the police chief out on a date, who referred to him as Buttercup, and did some other things. She hated us at that time. 2 years earlier, she loved us because we were saying things that she wanted to have said about a restaurant that failed. 2 years before that, she hated us. A year after that, she loved us because the city did a bad job of doing its parking for people with disabilities, and she was going to file a suit against it, and she loved it. We get used to that. If you work in this business, you get used to it. Our job is not, despite what people think, to tell people what to think. I'm not going to tell you whether Donald Trump is a great president or a terrible president. I have my personal opinions. They probably are the same as some of yours, but I'm not going to tell you that, but I'm not even going to talk about Donald Trump. My editorial this past week was, we're no longer going to mention his name in the paper, because every time we do, all that turns out is people are yelling at each other on Facebook. They see something, Trump did this, no, Trump does that, and nobody listens. So there's no point. So we're just not going to talk about it. We're going to talk about local things. If he comes to Marion County, that's fine. We'll talk about it. But he's the man whose name dare not be mentioned, just like I say that Alexa is the name that dare not be mentioned in my house, because the speaker will respond to it, or Siri if you've got an iPhone or whatever. But staying local, being concerned about this, we provide information. I honestly don't care what the public does with it. I mean, I might be disappointed if they do something different than what I wanted, but as long as they had the information, I feel comfortable that they made a decision, might have been wrong, but democracy works. Right now, democracy isn't working. And this is part of the reason why we're still working and trying to put out this paper and trying to come up with a system that will make it work into the future and hoping to make something that's replicatable to other newspapers. There are some great newspapers left in the state, small newspapers. There are also some just absolutely terrible ones. And we hope to elevate those that are absolutely terrible, and that's what the rate will end up doing, we hope. If so, it accomplished the exact reverse of what the people who were responsible for it wanted, and that we're happy about. Anyway, is there anybody who has any questions about anything? Yes, sir.
Has your experience there filtered into the county or the city voting preferences in terms of politics?
Not to my knowledge. One of the big problems is getting people to volunteer to be candidates. And small towns tend to, I don't know if this is true in every small town, but it certainly is in Marion, and it's true in Marion County. Most people are like the sergeant in No Times for Sergeant. Don't make waves. You're sitting in the smallest boat, and you're going to get turned over if you make waves. So they don't want to say anything. They want somebody else to say something for them, but there aren't candidates to do it. There's also a dysfunction within the political system right now. One of the things that if I were a state legislator, I would get rid of is the idea that when a vacancy occurs in a public office, that the precinct committeeman for that party will fill the seat. This basically solidifies the political divides even further than it does already. And I can tell you, I will tell you a story about that. We had a sheriff who was a COVID denier, and his church was a COVID denier. Both he and the pastor's daughter, who was married to the sheriff's son, all died of COVID.
Oh.
Came time to replace the sheriff, and the head of the Republican Party also runs an organization called the Patriots for Liberty in Marion County, which is a very right-wing organization. She goes to those meetings with a gun. The vote was very close. The undersheriff was a good guy, was one candidate, and a guy who had left years ago and gone off and become a railroad detective was the other candidate. I did not hear this directly, but I've heard it from so many people who said they did hear it directly that I have to say that it's probably true. She said, I have just one question for the two candidates. When Biden comes to get your guns, what are you going to do? And the undersheriff said, I will follow every law. There will be no violence. Every law will be strictly enforced to the letter of what it's doing. We will not allow this to deteriorate into violence. The other candidate said, I'll shoot the son of a bitch. Guess who got to be sheriff?
Shoot the son of a bitch.
Yeah, that's what happens when you have things. When in Marion County, every constitutional officer that we vote on came to office, with one exception, came to office for the first time by being appointed by precinct committee. At that point, you're not getting real elections. Now, don't think that I just said that I endorse the elect state Supreme Court justices routine, because we do get to vote on Supreme Court justices. We get to vote to retain them or not.
Mm-hmm.
This is just a backdoor way of trying to get abortion made illegal in Kansas. Yes, sir.
If I remember correctly,
most unusual ones that I thought was unusual was Voice of America covered it. Of course, that was before Voice of America was gutted.
Yeah.
They did a really good job of covering it. But I've got, things from the BBC, from The Guardian, from Le Monde, from other international papers. We were lucky enough to receive the Maria Ressa Award for Courage in Journalism. Maria Ressa, who is a Nobel Prize winner from the Philippines, was there to present the award. And she had been following the story in Manila. And I was asking her enough questions. She followed it both days. She followed it the first day before my mother had died, and then she followed it the day when my mother died too, so she knew the difference between the 2 days. We had a great talk about it. So it's really remarkable that it spanned the world. And a lot of the people in other places, and I'll tell you what Maria Ressa told me, she says, we look to the United States as the place where things like this don't happen.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I heard this from someone in Egypt who said the same thing, We thought the United States, things like this didn't happen. We understand they happen in Egypt. They happen all the time. But we didn't think they happened in the United States. One of the things that's really interesting about being covered by so many journalists is, as a journalism professor, you get to evaluate how well they do their job. Some of them are really good, and
Give them
some
a
of them
grade.
are really bad. Some of them don't know what they're doing. You can twist them very easily. Well, part of it is particularly the local TV reporters. There's a class of reporter called an MMJ, multimedia journalist. They're paid dirt, and they have no experience, and they're more concerned about setting up their cameras than they are about what they say on the camera. If you give them a quote that sounds like if it's a cool quote, they'll stop bugging you. It's like it's the way that you always control the press. Back years and years ago, Walter Cronkite, the great Walter Cronkite, honored a strike by radio and television artists, and he was filled in for by a producer by the name of Arnold Zinker. So back in the day when they had the teletypes clacking, this is the CBS Evening News with Arnold Zinker. And Arnold Zinker did it for a couple of weeks. And then Arnold Zinker went on to anchor in Boston. Then he became a PR guy. And Arnold Zinker is the one who came up with the line during the 70s oil embargo. If you like the nationalized postal service, you'll love nationalized oil. I mean, it's an ad hominem fallacy if you're going to things of that nature, but it ran as the second paragraph of every story. It ran on every morning newscast. It ran everywhere. That's how you control the press. Give them a quote that they find too good to pass up, and you can control them. And there were a lot of people who did it. There were a lot of people who did much further. I got called by a reporter who 20 years earlier had interviewed me for the New York Times about, I was somewhat of an expert in online publishing. And she talked to me for days and days, Felicity Behringer. And she ended up not even using anything I said in her story. She used all sorts of people I pointed her to, which is fine. I mean, this is journalists, this is great use of sourcing. She called me during this raid and said, don't you screw this up. She was the editor of the Stanford Daily when the Privacy Protection Act was created to protect the paper. And they had seized photos of a demonstration to get back at demonstrators, and that's why she says, don't screw this up. We've got to make sure this works right. So that's part of my motivation too. Other questions? Yes?
What happened to the lady restaurateur?
She closed her restaurant, moved to Newton, worked as a hostess for a restaurant in Wichita, and her house burned down.
Oh.
And I don't know what's happened to her since then. She did finally get divorced from her husband.
Is she still driving?
We don't know. We don't know. We did, for a while, think about staking out her car and seeing whether it was driven. It was not only her son also did the same thing.
Did her husband finally get his truck back or his car?
You know, I don't know. I will have to ask him. He's one of the people you don't have to worry about getting involved in things.
He usually shows up at city council meetings and makes his case known. He was the community built his house for him. He was a quadriplegic or a paraplegic. The community as a donation built the house for him to live in. He was married to another person at that time. She became his paid caregiver and got married to him, and then later said some really nasty things about him to other people. We don't think that was a particularly love-filled marriage, shall we say. We kind of think it was a money-filled marriage. But other questions anyone has? Yeah.
Where's the police chief now? I know he's moving around.
He is in Hawaii. Now, everybody thinks that means he went on vacation. He is a native Hawaiian. He went to Hawaii. He's working for the Postal Service as an IT specialist, we believe, except he couldn't run the computer, so we don't know how he's an IT specialist. We did call the Honolulu Police Department and say, have you employed him as an officer? And the police chief says, we know who he is. He does not now know, will he ever work for the Honolulu Police Department.
Any other questions for Eric?